Welcome to I Wish You Could Hear This, where we explore great stories and simple proven steps to help you thrive in life, faith, and relationships.
In our research, we've heard hundreds of hope-filled strategies for marriage, parenting, leadership, and life that are grounded in science and consistent with biblical truth. And now you can hear them too.
I'm Shaunti Feldhahn.
And I'm Jeff Feldhahn.
One of the most difficult issues that faces couples today is the pain that comes when one person is dealing with a compulsion or addiction to pornography or has engaged in some other sort of betrayal. That can be traumatic for the betrayed partner and the marriage. Or maybe the trauma wasn't even inflicted by the spouse, but by an outside traumatic situation, but it's impacting the marriage anyway. When betrayal or trauma happens, we can feel so helpless to know what to do. Matthew and Joanna Raabsmith know that feeling very personally, and they have taken their pain and turned it into purpose. They've received years of specialized training in helping couples walk through healing from trauma and betrayal. And today on I Wish You Could Hear This, they will share their story and the practical steps that will help any couple dealing with these issues. As you can imagine, this will be a PG-13 conversation, so be cautious with children who might overhear.
Matthew and Joanna, thanks so much for joining us on I Wish You Could Hear This. Let me introduce you all to our listeners. Matthew and Joanna are both professional coaches and are also certified through a group called Raabsmiths, which is the Association of Partners of Sex Addicts Trauma Specialists. Joanna is also a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified as a trauma therapist. Their mission is to help couples navigate the complexities of relational challenges, particularly in the aftermath of sexual addiction and betrayal trauma. Matthew and Joanna, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having us. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
So grateful that you guys are willing. Now, You guys have a lot of credentials behind your names. But what's most important, and one of the reasons we were interested in talking with you, is that you've actually lived it as well. And you're now helping so many couples find true intimacy. We're really looking forward to diving into that.
But before we get into that, could you guys just take a minute and tell us about where you live, your family, a bit more about what life is like for you all these days?
Yeah, we find ourselves very busy. We're we call it in the thick of it. We've been married 16 years. We have 3 amazing kids. We have a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 6-year-old.
Oh, you really are in the thick of it. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
You know, and we work together, we parent together, we live together, we do so much together, and we live in Memphis, Tennessee, and it's been a really, really fun journey the last few years, getting to see our work and our life really integrate into it together, and so we have a lot of fun, but we stay very, very active.
I'm quite sure. And Memphis, man, that was home of some of the best barbecue I've ever had when we had a speaking engagement in Memphis a few years back.
It was. we actually went, and I'm gonna. Everyone from Memphis is gonna go, I can't believe you got this wrong. But is it the Peabody Hotel?
Peabody.
You got it. Peabody.
Well,
That's Boston.
That's Boston. Yeah, in Boston they call Peabody Peabody.
And we waited in a big crowd to watch the ducks come down the elevator and then walk through the lobby.
It's Graceland. You get to go to Graceland and you get to see ducks.
See
and that
the ducks.
is
I'm so excited.
What could be better? I mean, this was quite a few years ago, actually, because I think we had the kids with us. Because they were probably in that, age group like 10 years old.
Where they liked watching ducks walk down.
They back in the day, yes. Okay, to switch to a totally different topic.
So we're going to be getting into discussions about sexual addiction and betrayal trauma. So just so that we're on the same page, how do you define those two things?
Let's define them first before we start talking about them. Yeah.
Great.
I think it's good to start with sexual addiction because it's usually the root of the relational kind of impact. And, sexual addiction is one of those things where it's really interesting. There's some folks who have kind of labeled it as a diagnosable addiction. There's communities that say it's not. What we do know is that there are just a huge portion of the population struggles with compulsive, problematic sexual behavior. And that's what we really focus on is whenever I am engaging in sexual behavior that really doesn't align with my values, that go outside of who I want to be and what I want to be. And I do that compulsively, meaning even though I want to stop, even though I can see the damage it's doing to me and to others, I still continue in this behavior. That's really what is at the heart of addiction, is that seeing the damage done and yet continuing in the behavior. And so that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about sexual addiction. And with sexual addiction, because there are so many different types of sexual behaviors, it can take a lot of different forms, from online pornography to interactions with people over texting, online affairs, but also then physical interactions, right? To really go to the kind of full gamut. And so one of the things that I think is difficult for people is sexual addiction doesn't look one little way, right? It's not one simple thing. And it's one of the ways that people often get caught is in this issue is they think, well, I don't do that, right? I don't do this set of things, right? I haven't crossed a physical line with anyone, so I must not have a problem. But they're just as entrenched in this problematic behavior, which what happens is with sexual addiction, it's often a behavior that is really, really hidden. More so than substance abuse, which is typically a little bit more public. It's seen, right? People notice, right? Someone's drinking or using substances. With sexual addiction, it is almost completely hidden.
Under the surface. It's a great point. Yeah.
And that's really what happens. And to the point where no one even suspects or even imagines that it's actually going on in their life. And that's what really does the damage and the rupture, both to the relationship, but also to the spouse, who really is kind of living a life they didn't realize they were experiencing.
Yeah, and so that's where we kind of then get to the partner side who's experiencing betrayal trauma. Like Matthew already shared, a lot of those things and most relationships are hidden. I don't know they're happening. I don't know they're going on. And because of that, I don't get choice over whether those things are present in my life and in our relationship. And for most people, those addictions, those things were there before the relationship ever got started. For most people who struggle with sexual addiction, it started adolescence, even early childhood, the beginnings of that addiction, even if it's growing over time. And so for most partners, I got married under a false pretense. I didn't know the full story. I didn't know what I was getting into, and I wasn't given that choice. And not only that, but so much of what's going on, again, I had no idea. And so when it finally comes out, when there's some honesty about, oh, this is going on, my entire world is shattered. I thought our relationship was something that it's not. And for most partners, they don't even get the full truth right away. They find, and a lot of times they stumble onto something. They find something, a computer tab that was left up or a text message, or right. And so all of a sudden, this one thing that doesn't fit into the structure of the reality shatters the whole reality. And so then it's this scramble of, how big is this? How deep does it go? How long has it been there? Kind of answering all of those questions. And so that's what creates a lot of that trauma for that partner. I don't know my own reality anymore. I don't know who I am. I don't know this person who I'm married to, and I don't know what this relationship is. And so that's where that comes from. Mm-hmm.
I can see how we have a couple layers here. Because you can have the sexual compulsion and the spouse feel very betrayed, like you were just saying, like, this is my reality. I had no idea that for the last 5 years we had a marriage that was different than I thought it was, because this was going on. Yeah. But I could also see, because there's many, many other ways that plays out, where Well, we got married. I knew that this was an issue. And,
Yeah.
and this person has been working on it. And it's not always the husband, right?
Mhm.
Like you
Yes,
have women who are
absolutely.
addicted to erotica, right?
Right.
And, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And so I knew that this was an issue that they were working on,
Mhm.
but it's not getting better. And so
Yes.
maybe there's not the sense of trauma, but there's the sense of betrayal.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
I can see
Mhm.
how, and I can see how things were like, somebody was really had victory and was free for years. And then
Mhm.
something goes wrong. They lose a job or something
Yeah.
happens with the kids or whatever. And
Absolutely.
suddenly that compulsion comes back up as a coping
Mhm.
mechanism and the
Yeah.
person's feeling flabbergasted. So
Mhm.
there's probably many different
Yes.
patterns.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
so I would love to dive into yours if that's
Mhm.
okay.
Absolutely.
Be,
Yeah.
because your pattern really was the betrayal trauma pattern, if I'm understanding
Mhm.
correctly. Like
Yes.
Mhm.
3 years into your marriage, I think, Joanna, you had confronted
Yeah.
Matthew,
Yes.
and Matt, you
Mhm.
had confessed that you had this hidden addiction. Can you tell us that story
Mhm.
Yeah.
and about that journey, that transformational journey
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
began with
Mm.
that confrontation?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Joanna mentioned, this for me, this was something that had been a part of my life for a really long time. I'm old enough to grow up on the MTV generation. I remember when we had to call the cable company and ask for MTV. But I also
Mhm.
remember being a young child and being exposed to a lot of very adult sexualized images. And I remember kind of not really understanding what I was seeing, but understanding that it was alluring. It kind of drew me in. And that really began to shape how I understood sexuality. And I can remember, right, watching movies with my family and hands going over my eyes at certain scenes and all of these things that really were confusing for me because sex, I grew up in a Christian home and sex never got talked about. It was never mentioned. It was the thing you're going to do one day, but we don't talk about it until that very moment that it happens. And so
Mhm.
all of this education, right, was kind of forming my understanding. And I was recognizing that it was something that felt good. There was a part of it that like felt good, but then there was also a part that felt kind of shameful. Like, well, wait, hold on. We don't talk about this. We don't mention this. We don't tell about it. And so as I really hit my years of puberty and development, this really started just to kind of continue to ratchet up. And I would either try to connect with females and try to kind of build relationships and feel better about myself because what I didn't know at the time was it was really being driven by my personal insecurities, these fears of not being enough, these fears of really being alone. We moved around a lot as a family, and so I was often the new kid in school, and so really creating connection was important for me. And sexual connection, right? Physical connection felt like the kind of connection that I really wanted. But what I didn't realize was how empty that feeling also was. And so I was constantly in search for the next thing. And this really developed over years. And so by the time Joanna and I got into a relationship, I had really created two lives. I was a pastor at the time, and I had this kind of outward facing public life of a good, kind of moral person. And then I had this life in the background that I hid from everybody, that I kept as this kind of secret. And Joanna had asked, she had kind of brought up some questions. She was wise enough to know, like, hey, you're a guy, right? I know that there's probably going to be some things going on. Is this an issue for you? And I had just said, in the past, yeah, it was a deal. Not anymore. Nothing to worry about. You're fine.
And it's really weird early in a relationship when you're wanting to trust this person, right? You're newly married. You think like, yes, we both committed to this, right? I'm wanting to trust him. So when I ask the question, he gives me that answer. I'm left either trusting him and not trusting my gut, or trusting my gut and then not trusting him,
Oh, that
right?
is a really hard place to be.
Yes,
Yes,
it
yes.
is absolutely.
And what was hard was our relationship was really good at the time. And like you said, I wasn't really active in my addiction. So I was really convinced that, hey, our relationship, our marriage, our life will make it all go away and I'll be done. And that actually lasted for a little bit. But as kind of the months wore on in our relationship, as things started to be difficult in our life, as we started to face challenges, I went back to some of those old coping behaviors, those old soothing techniques, and I re-engaged. And the more I engaged, the more I hid. And the more I hid, the more I had shame. And the more I would engage. And it just got caught in this pattern. And this really went on for years in our relationship. And Joanna would try to come close. She would kind of try to engage me, and I would pull away. And she wouldn't understand. She would be like, "Wait, why don't? What's wrong?" And I would really want to hide from her and say like, and I would make excuses like, "Oh, it's work, stressful at church, or there's a lot on my mind right now." But it was all this facade because I really didn't want her to know what was going on with me.
And just felt such shame. I
Yeah.
mean, and knowing that it's
It's interesting as I've heard you talk about this, and the compulsion and the shame factor is so significant.
and we've seen that in our research
For sure.
25 years.
What's
yeah.
interesting is that I'm trying to think of a counterpart in other areas of my life where I feel the shame. So let's just say that we did a research project on money, and I could be a compulsive saver, but I never felt shame about that. I mean, and then
Yeah.
I could stomp on Shaunti's dreams and things that she'd do, but it never felt like I had something I really had to deal with. This one, I think the person who's engaging in it almost just knows. I'd imagine you guys are the therapists, but I'd imagine it's not particularly common for someone to go, "No, I'm good with this," and she's just got to, or he's just got to learn to live with it.
Well, that is common, I would say, in some communities. I mean, remember in some of the research where we were interviewing, because I should explain that we've done so much research on men and women and some of these different things, and some of the random interviews in coffee shops. And I can still remember talking to somebody in a Chick-fil-A of all places. And there was at the time an adult bookstore across the street. And there had been some controversy about it, and we got into this conversation because there were some people standing around with like picket signs and stuff, and he was like, "What's the problem? Like, of course, like it's just me and my wife. This is our thing. This is what we do, and it's it's healthy. It spices things up." And I'm like, I am not going to get into a debate with a guy in public at Chick-fil-A about how damaging this is. But there are people.
Again, I think it's more the outliers.
I think that is more and certainly in the church, and certainly when you have the Holy Spirit like in you, convicting you.
I was going to say, because a lot of people come in with their own individual values, and usually they've at least made sure they match up in those values, right? Even if they don't have explicit conversations about it, they get married with the understanding that we have shared values. And in some ways, it's because of the power imbalance, right? Yeah, if they came together and before they got married, they said, pornography is fine, it should be on the table, and they both agree to that, like that's a different relationship than where they both go, "No, this is toxic and unhealthy."
Great point.
Great, let's get married and move forward. And now someone's secretly engaging in that.
Yes.
Or so that I think that plays into it.
So I want to go to the sort of another level in this conversation, because one of the things that I'm curious, and I don't actually know the answer to this, so I'm a little nervous to ask you this, Joanna, but because I don't actually know the whole story from front to back with you guys. But one of the things that we have heard from many men who have had this compulsion or addiction to pornography, who feel this incredible shame, they do not want to be engaging, and it goes in cycles often. I have heard so many men tell me, either I can't talk to my wife about this, like I can't even raise it because she would freak out, and it's better just to keep it hidden and work on it myself, which of course doesn't seem to ever work particularly well. Or I tried to raise it with my wife and she freaked out, so I'm never doing that again. Or I finally had to raise this with my wife, or she caught me, or whatever, and I had to be honest. And either her compassion or her willingness to walk alongside something she didn't really understand, not understanding that compulsion, that approach seemed to have a much better return than the freaking out approach. And I'm curious if that fits with your experience and your story. Like, Joanna, how did you receive that when he finally confessed?
I'll turn to Matthew. How did you experience me?
Yeah, it was crazy because kind of how it came about was Joanna heard a testimony of a pastor. She was actually in her marriage and family therapy, first class in her degree program to become a therapist. This pastor came and gave his testimony about sexual addiction, betrayal, all in the restoration process, both of him kind of as a pastor, but also of their marriage.
And as he was talking, he was like listing the path, the resources, everything he used to heal from this. And as he's talking, like, I can just feel it in my gut. I'm like, this is the thing that is keeping us, right? Because we both would say we want connection and intimacy, but every time we'd move in, he would get angry or pull away or withdraw or right. And so I was like, what is going on here? And I was like, oh, this has to be it. And I finally have a roadmap for what we'll do if I ask the question and Matthew responds with yes.
And so wow. So she comes home and she tells the story, and I'm like, she's telling the story, and I'm like, oh God.
Let's not go there.
Because I'm like, if
and I'm trying to like crack the door open so he can be responsible and be honest, and he is not going through that.
I'm like,
door.
cool.
What a great
okay,
story.
let's get to lunch, right? And she's like, she finally stopped, and she's like, I need you to be honest. Like, are you going through this? And the words yes like came out of my mouth, and I just remember being like, oh God, it's over. And I was, I because I had that idea that the moment she finds this out, it will be over. My life will be over. Everything I do will be over, right? I will have to start everything again. And she got real quiet and she handed me the list and she said, here's your way forward.
So all the notes I had taken in class, I was like, here you go.
And now, we didn't talk for a couple of weeks. Like, it was very quiet in our household for a couple of weeks.
I'll say, like, I didn't freak out, but I wasn't compassionate.
No.
I was assertive and I had boundaries. And I said, you are better than this and you will get your life together. Like, that was probably more what I said.
And you can be compassionate and have boundaries at the same time.
Oh, 100%. But there was little compassion at that point in our journey.
And I can see that too. Yeah.
But I think having the way forward, and that was huge for me too.
I think a lot of guys will tell themselves the lie that my partner won't be okay, they'll be angry, they'll leave me, as a way to not step into that vulnerability. Because vulnerability is scary. It's risky. I don't want to do that, but it is amazing for so many couples that we work with. That partner is like ready and willing to do the work more so than the betrayer usually, right? You would think it's the other way around, but it is amazing strength and compassion that these betrayed spouses show up with, going like, this hurts, but I don't want to give up on us.
Yeah.
I love that. Can I just interrupt for a second? I want to just press in on that for a second, because if you are listening to this and you know that this is an issue in your life and you have been hiding something, it is true. We will make excuses to ourselves to avoid being vulnerable by saying my spouse is going to leave me or they're going to freak out, and okay, maybe there are going to be some hard, situations, but it's probably bigger than you're building it up in your mind to be bigger as an excuse to avoid dealing with it.
And I got to tell you, I mean, as I'm listening to this and looking back over my own life, as a kid, being exposed to the neighbor's magazine stack of magazines, and struggling, through that, through our early years. There is, at least in my case, there was always this hope still that I'm going to I'm going to unlock this at some point. It's going to, so I don't need to bring it to Shaunti and tell her, because
I'll figure it out.
I'm going to
I'll
figure it out.
figure
I'm
it
going
out.
to keep
Yep.
working at it. I mean, it's kind of like when I go
Yeah.
to the store and buy a pair of pants.
Mm-hmm.
I know that they're fitting tight, but I am going to lose the weight and these are going to look awesome. And I can't tell you how many pairs of pants are still hanging in my closet because, alas, I haven't yet found the key to unlock on that one. So not to make light of this though,
Yeah.
but I do find that was the story I was telling myself. And I have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that shame cycle we talked about earlier, right? My shame tells me don't tell anyone, but I can't get rid of my shame without being open and honest and actually telling someone. Brene Brown has done so much research on vulnerability, and that actually talking and sharing my story, being honest, is what lowers my shame and will help me break out of that addiction.
Yeah, I can totally see that. And I'm so sorry, Matthew, you had started to say something and I interrupted you. I don't know if you remember what you were going to say.
Well, no, I was gonna say, like, exactly what Joanna said. I think we've all been saying. Most of these concepts are stuck in our brains, right? My belief was that everyone would leave me. My belief was that all of the relationships that I had built over my life, no one would understand. And I became a part of a 12-step recovery group for sex addicts, and we used to always joke about, like, you can tell someone you're in, AA, and they'll be like, "Hey, congratulations, way to go!" Right? You tell them you're in SA, right? You're a sex addict in recovery, and the fear is always they're gonna go, okay,
That's not good.
like, good luck with that. But what's really interesting is that's not what happened to me. As I shared with Joanna, as I started to share with more and more people, specifically with men early on in the journey, I felt incredible levels of acceptance and compassion and grace. And that is really, really key. And it does matter. And it is there. And I think the world and our enemy has created such a perspective that this is a death sentence for anyone to know. And I tell people all the time, like, I did not want to be the guy who goes on podcasts or goes, around the world telling about my, former sexual addiction. It wasn't the life plan. But I love my life, right? This life that I get to live in openness and freedom is so much better because it's what has allowed God to get in and to do the healing work that I was so desperate to have. I remember about a month or 2 months before this moment where Joanna had this testimony given to her and passed on to me, one night I was in our apartment and I was praying to God and I was like, God, I can't do this anymore. I hate this. I know it's killing me. I know it's killing us, but I don't know the way forward. If you would just give me a path, if you would just show me the steps to follow, I'll take it, God. And then here comes this list. And it was like, and I was a little frustrated. Like, I was like, okay, God, I didn't mean like an actual list. I meant like a metaphorical list. And one day, but it was like, it was this like door that unlocked for me. And it has been the path that I continue to walk down, of really opening myself and trusting Him. And it's what has allowed us to experience the relationship we deserve. The tragic thing is that when we hide in shame, we prevent ourselves from ever being accepted. I really was preventing the experience of being loved. And I didn't know that. I thought I was keeping love intact, but I was actually keeping it from myself. And so being vulnerable, naming the things that I'm struggling with, has actually allowed me to feel loved for the first time really in my life, fully, completely. It's that idea of kind of that naked and unashamed, right? That I am really accepting of who I am and letting others accept me.
Wow, that is
Fantastic.
That is fantastic. I instinctively, I want to turn this into 2 episodes. I want to take the time to go through what is it that you did. I want to know what was on that list. I want to go through what is it that you did and what have you seen over the years
in your practice
as you have walked this road with many other couples, and have seen what works and what doesn't work. So I want to do part 2, but before we get there, Matthew and Joanna, tell us how people can find you. We'll put that in the show notes.
Absolutely. Easiest way to find us is on our website, www.raabsmithsteam.com.
And now Raabsmith is 2 A's.
It is 2
R-A-A-B,
A's.
yes.
R-A-A-B, right? S-M-I-T-H, team.com. There's a ton of resources. We have assessments that couples can take, free resources that we love to get away. And you can also kind of find about all the different ways we support couples with our practice.
That's awesome. All right, we'll come back for part 2. Thanks for listening to I Wish You Could Hear This. Remember to subscribe to our podcast. And as always, forward today's audio or video link to a friend, counselor, or pastor who would be encouraged.